Welcome back to Speed Secrets, Ross Bentley's podcast that I've taken over again. Everybody's Christmas wish did not come true. I'm back, Bill Fischer from Garage Heroes in Training, but I did have Ross Bentley, so you can stay on now. Welcome, Ross.
It's great to be welcomed to this podcast.
Especially when it insures.
Well, no, it is the listeners there. How's that? Yeah, how's that?
That's sounded tremendous.
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. And if you believe that, no.
It's for them.
We're here just to have some fun and talk driving stuff.
It is.
Yeah.
So Ross, we had
and we're going to continue with this little theme where you get to ask me some questions.
I do.
And I get to attempt to answer them sounding somewhat intelligent, hopefully.
That's true.
Okay.
And we have a different thematic sequence to this episode than we've had before. On this one, I thought it would be great to talk about some of the most notable or notorious turns that people have, because as I've progressed as my driving, I've noticed that if I get good at a turn, I start having a portfolio of turns, and I can say, well, this one's just like this one, so I approach it the same way. So hopefully this will apply, and we're going to try to cover some of the more notable turns. And if anybody else has a turn that they'd like covered that's been causing them problems, or just that they don't think they're getting everything out of, they could always write into you at Speed Secrets. But we thought we'd start with a list of 4 or 5 of these and see what we get. So the first one that comes up is the Keyhole at Mid-Ohio. It's a 180-degree turn.
There's only one way to drive it.
I've never heard you say there's only one way to do anything. So
Right.
I am thinking you are not answering correctly.
I'm being slightly sarcastic. Well, no, there is only one way. There is only one way, the right way. Now, the right way can depend a little on a variety of different things, track conditions. I would say one of the things that makes Mid-Ohio so interesting and so challenging is I don't know of another track in the world that changes so dramatically with the conditions.
Especially wet.
If the wet, it's mind-boggling the where the grip is or where it isn't. But even, I've been there where in the morning you want to drive the Keyhole one way, and then in the afternoon you want to drive it a very different way. And I'm going to say the two sort of classic ways of driving the Keyhole is, the first one is the classic line of you drive it straight up, you kind of brake in a relatively straight line, you turn in relatively late, you kind of release the brakes, trail in a little bit, and you kind of have that one arc around to a late apex, and then you get out of the corner. Yep. The second, not quite as classic, but still a very often used approach, is more of a diamond line, where you come in, you brake, and you kind of almost brake on a little bit of an angle, and you come in and have for some drivers, it's actually makes 2 apexes in the corner, or apices. And so there's you kind of angle across and you brake into the corner up to sort of the point of the diamond, where you then change the direction a little bit more dramatically and then point it back for the second apex and drive it out of the corner.
So it's kind of a sharper double apex.
So the point of the diamond is a little sharper, but the advantage of that is if you come in on that classic line of the kind of the slow in, fast out, if you brake straight up into the corner and then you turn in, the point that you turn in, you still have to slow a fair amount. And then from that point to the point where you can begin accelerating is actually quite long in relative terms. So you spend a fair amount of time at a relatively slow speed. And whereas if you come in and use more of that diamond line, it's the attitude is in fast, collect it in the middle, out fast. Whereas the classic line is more of a in slow, wait, out fast. But
you're in there a while.
Yeah. Therefore, for a lot of cars, a lot of drivers, that more of a diamond line is faster. And I was coaching this past year At the IMSA race, at a prototype challenge, LMP3 cars, and it actually was surprising to me the number of experienced, highly proficient, very good drivers who drove more of that classic in slow out fast and
Mhm.
never really, watching every lap of every practice session, never seen those drivers even attempt the other line. And the driver that I was coaching, he had spent hours and hours and days on the simulator trying both of those lines. So we had a pretty good idea what was going to work when we got there. And then we got there, went with the favorite that worked on the sim. And then at some point it's like, okay, got to try the other one, because there might be a time and a place just traffic wise where the other line works. And, we ended up settling on, for the fast lap, this is the line you want, but it's good to know that you've got the other one as well. And you've
Right.
run it enough times in practice that you know what that feels like as well.
Mhm.
So, um,
Is that line selection going to change whether or not the chicane is there?
yes.
And what and my favorite type of podcast guest, thank you. What would you lean towards going more after the diamond line because your entry is artificially narrower than it would be without the chicane?
Correct. Yeah. So as you come out of the chicane, I wouldn't shoot all the way back out to the left and really square the corner off. I would just kind of come in relatively tight, hug that inside, and essentially you pick up what would be the diamond line if you were not using the chicane.
Hmm.
But
Yep.
because you kind of just merge into it, it's less of a compromise that way. And
Right.
if you think about practically every corner, you're just trying to balance out the compromises. There
Yeah.
are, so
Nothing's
it's,
perfect, right?
yeah, yeah. Uh, Other than the next corner, because we all know the
Exactly.
next corner is going to be perfect.
It's
I'm going to nail it.
awesome.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
It's always disappointing after I finish it though.
yeah. So
Um,
the other thing I just say about that is it also is a little dependent on how your car works as well. If your car, if you have a difficult time getting the car to change direction, to rotate at that tightest portion of the diamond,
mhm.
you may end up having to run a little bit more of that kind of a larger arc around the corner with the more of the classic style of line. And uh, I'm sitting here kind of chuckling, going, the one downside of a podcast is I'm moving my hands around and showing all these things, and nobody's getting it. So
It's
I'm
okay. I
just gonna,
can't see him either. I just see your face. So
I,
don't worry.
I'm gonna. Oh, you don't want to see that. But I think, part of it depends if your car doesn't, it has a difficult time, or you as a driving style have a difficult time getting the car to rotate on that. First of all, you're a little uncomfortable braking while turning,
Hmm.
and the car maybe is a little nervous when you do that. That would lead you more to trying more of that sort of classic line of the slow in, larger arc in the very beginning line, and that might work for you better. But if your car does change direction nicely, if you're good with the brake release and you can get that car to come in there, kind of release off as you're coming on that little bit of an arc, and then you get to the sort of the tip of the diamond, and you just hang on the brake just that tiniest little bit to get the car to rotate. Now you're off the brakes and squeezing back to power, and now you've got a in fast, out fast kind of a corner, as opposed
Hmm.
to a in slow, then out fast
Right.
kind of a
Right.
thing.
So, for those of you playing at home, if you were wishing that we had done Madness instead of Keyhole, please let us know because it's on the list too.
Well, madness is just plain madness, so
Exactly.
we'll leave it
But
for another day, maybe.
we will. We
Yeah,
will.
yeah.
All right. Let's travel across the country. Where we started off in the middle. Let's give our southern friends a little bit of attention. And uh, the two areas where I thought offered the most opportunity, especially at my speed, was 10A, 10B through 12, or 5 through 7. Which one do you think you want to do, Ross?
And I'm assuming just you're talking Road Atlanta because you didn't
Road
even
Atlanta.
mention the
Oh, I
track.
didn't say. I'm sorry. I read it right here though, Ross. It's written right on my screen. Sorry, podcast listeners.
So
This
you're
is why.
talking 10A, 10B at the end of the back straight, up over 11 and down through 12
Yes. Or
versus
5, which is right
and
after the S's, through 6 and 7,
right.
the back end.
Are you asking the question which is most important, or are you asking which has got? And by the way, I think what we're talking about here are, there are a lot of corners that they're pretty standard and they're pretty much most people are going to drive them pretty similar. The differences are very, very subtle. And we're talking about corners that I call our character corners. And character corners are the ones like the Keyhole at Mid-Ohio where, there is no obvious, oh, you always do it this way or you always do it that way. And they are quite different in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So are you asking the question of which is
one
most
has
important?
more? Which one has more art or skill to it, or opportunities to try and experiment? Because one thing I notice, a lot of people who do our sport, they can become repetitive and they just do it because they do it and they don't try anything else. And some of these turns, depending on the day, depending on the car, depending on your skill, there's 3 or 4 or 5 different ways to go through these.
Well, the great thing about Road Atlanta is that is a character track.
Yeah,
that's good. So I would say turn 5, 6, 7 is worth discussing. I'm not taking anything away from 10A, 10B because really the way I look at 10A, 10B, and maybe I'm jumping across and trying to get both here, but
seems like you like Road Atlanta, Ross.
I probably have more laps at Road Atlanta. Well, maybe not. Road Atlanta is one of those tracks that I have many laps on. I used to drive for a team in Atlanta. We did a lot of testing there. I spent a lot of days there. But 10B is really the start of a straightaway all the way to turn 1. And sure,
the way I drove.
there are some cars that have to have a speed adjustment for 12, but it's a small speed adjustment, and the ability to get out of 10B is so critical that really, it sets your speed all the way to turn 1 to some extent. And some cars are flat or near flat through 12. So definitely it's 10B is so important. But I think 5 is one of the most challenging corners.
Everybody I talked to thought it was, it's just there.
There's so much going on there. There's the hill on the approach.
Yep.
For most cars, you're braking while having a little bit of steering angle in it, a little bit, just trying to bring it back to the right from the end of the S's still. So you've got a little bit of steering angle in. The track goes up a hill, then it reduces the amount of elevation change. I'm not saying it's still going uphill, but not as steeply. And then it gains a little bit more again, and then it flattens out again. So there's kind of a few plateaus all the way through it. And then there's the curbing at the exit, and how much of that curbing to use is dictated by how your car handles it, and or how much are you willing to beat up your car. One of those two.
Right. And if it's wet.
And if it's wet, yes. To me, the trick, one of the tricks, or not trick, but one of the key things in turn 5 is actually to get your foot off the brake. It's really tempting. If your foot stays on the brake pedal, like with barely, 1 PSI of pressure on the brake pedal for 1 foot too long, that hill is going to overslow the car.
Yes.
So I'm constantly, every single time I approach 5, I'm kind of like, I'm always reminding myself, get your foot off the brake, get your foot off the brake, get your foot off the brake, to the point where you're almost scaring yourself going into the corner, taking your foot off the brake, going, oh my God, this is really fast. And then you're really into the compression of the hill so much there that it's like, oh, and then you come out of it and go, I should have got off the brakes earlier and got back to power sooner. And that's what makes 5 so challenging. I think it's tricky from a visual perspective, again, because you're coming down into that hole, and for some cars, it's almost like you kind of got to kind of cock your head in a weird angle to kind of get your head down and look up the hill to see where you're going.
Your vision artificially compresses right there, and
Yeah.
you're doing exactly what you shouldn't be doing.
And, there's a point where you're kind of looking there and you're going, I see the apex, but I can't see the exit point because it's kind of up and over top of the hill. So it's like, I can't quite see the corner. Oh, there's the middle of the corner, but I still can't see the exit of the corner. So it's a super challenging corner. And I would say that if somebody says it's not, they're not fast enough.
Yep, I would agree.
And, that straightaway down to turn 6, it's not super long, but it's a great passing opportunity if you're in, especially in multi-class. If you're in single make, if you're in Spec Miata or something where the cars are all very, very equal, you almost have to have somebody mess up 5 a little bit for you to get enough of a run that you can get all the way in there and outbrake somebody into 6. But if you're in multi-class racing, it's for sure, it's a big opportunity to pass somebody. And 6 is another corner. Like if you look at a track map, the radius of 6 is, I'm going to use the example of it's a 3rd gear corner. But in a lot of cars, you take it in 4th gear because it's a lot faster than it looks because of the amount of banking camber that the track has. So, and there is no straightaway. Practically, there is no straightaway after turn 6. So exit speed does not matter. Who cares about exit speed at a turn? I know some people are like, oh, but I got back to power way earlier than you did in turn 6. And I'm going, who cares? What matters in 6 is how much speed can you flow through it. You want to throw as much speed into 6 as you possibly can. And the only thing that matters is you get out of 6 on the track. And then the challenge of Road Atlanta, I think, is turn 7 is a completely different rhythm than the rest of the track. It is a different, you look at it and go, well, how is it different than 10A and 10B? It has a different rhythm. And I think it's because of 10A, 10B, you've been on this long straightaway and mentally you're prepared for it. Whereas 7, it's like you come through 6, Holland, you know what? And I was like, oh my God, now there's a slow corner right in front of me. I got to get the car slowed down, get the car to rotate, turn, and get out of this corner. And I've been through from 12, 1, all 3, all the way down through the S's and 5 and 6 that are all kind of fast flowing corners. And 7 is not a fast flowing corner. So completely different rhythm. And
if you blow 7, you pay for it.
You pay for it for a long, long time. Yes.
And you get to think about it.
Yeah.
And just beat yourself up.
While you're waving to the car in front of you, driving away from you. And
exactly.
Yeah. So it's what makes Road Atlanta such an amazing track. And but I'd say, to me, when I go coaching a driver there at Road Atlanta, most times, not always, but most times, the first corner that I go to work with a driver on is turn 5. And it's because of that, it's so easy to overslow for that corner, and you cannot make it up. Turn 6, if you overslow, okay, it's cost you a little bit, but again, there's no straightaway afterwards. So it doesn't hurt you as bad. Whereas if you overslow by half a mile an hour in turn 5, you pay for it. And then you get to turn 7. If you try to carry half a mile an hour too much, you pay for it. So,
and too little, you pay for it too. So
yeah.
And then traffic makes it just so much fun going through there. So.
Yeah, I absolutely love Road Atlanta because of that. And I would say most tracks almost have a throwaway corner. I don't think Road Atlanta does. Like
probably closest would be 6, but you can't because you need it for 7.
Exactly. And 6 isn't going to hurt you in a racing situation too badly. But for a good lap time, you have to be fast through it. And you have to carry more speed through it than you think you're capable of carrying through there. And again, you need to trust the banking, the camber, and the track is going to hold you. It's going to grip you.
And
Yeah,
even though there's that short little straightaway between 6 and 7, it doesn't mean don't go back to gas. Get back to it.
get back to it, because then when you go to the brakes for 7, the car has energy in it. And I talk about this a lot, that, if you coast up to a corner and then you brake for it, the car doesn't have any energy, and the weight transfer isn't enough. But if you come up to it at full throttle and then you go to the brake, the car, you're bringing the car into the corner with energy in it. It's got some load in it, and so
and you've got some feel for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know I'm sort of I'm bouncing all over the track here, but
it's okay.
Turn 1 and turn 6 in many cars, if you go through turn 1 and turn 6 and you aren't kind of going, oh, like there's some physical work going on here, you're not going fast enough. In a prototype car, like I tell drivers that I coach that are racing LMP3 or LMP2, something like that, or Daytona prototype DPI, if they don't turn in, and when they hit that hill in around the apex, if their body doesn't go, ugh, they haven't gone fast enough. And there's a little bit of that in 6 as well. It's like, as you turn in there, if you're going, I'm comfortable, you're probably not carrying enough speed. And that's, that can be in a spec Miata. There still should be enough of a G load in that corner where you kind of go, oh, wow, I really feel it here.
Yeah, especially relative to the other turns on that track, which is a little smoother usually.
Yeah, and I would say, the actual G load in turn 5 is not as high, nowhere near as high as it is in turn 6. So you're not going to feel that same G load, because there's that little bit of it. You're coming up and then you crest the hill. So the car just doesn't have the same level of grip there.
Yeah. Yeah. And the key to me, at least I think the key to me, I don't remember your track walk as close as I can because I haven't been there in 2 years, but I think the key to me was always, if I could get a consistent exit out of the S's to set up for 5, I had a chance. But if I was even off, half a car length either side, width actually, it was just a downward spiral, and it was quick.
You can to use that old saying, you can get behind in your steering going down through the S's.
Yeah,
and find yourself, I got to catch that one, I got to catch this one, and the catches get bigger and worse as you go down the hill. So yeah,
especially if you're on one of those fortuitous days where there's the 2 rivers going through the S's. So that's yeah, baby.
Better be straight when you go through them. So yeah.
All right, so we've hit the Southeast.
Where are we going next?
We've hit the Midwest. I think we have to make all the iRacing and Gran Turismo fans. We have to go to Laguna Seca, or we're going to get yelled at. Now,
by me.
Well, okay, we've got turn 2, or we've got the 8A 9 complex.
Okay.
Both of them are joyous for very, very, very different reasons. But
so turn 2 being what some people call turn 1, but turn 1's that little tiny kink in the front straightaway. Turn 2 is the
double apex
180 degree plus corner
after a good straightaway. Yeah.
And it is a corner. It's a little bit, it is a little bit like the Keyhole at Mid-Ohio, in that some drivers will drive sort of with that classic line of keeping it out wide and then bringing it around to one late apex and get out of there. And most people tell you that's not the way to drive it. And I'm one of those to tell you that I'm not saying that can't work, but in most cases, you're better off coming in and having a double apex and a little bit of a diamond. That first apex in some cars, just the angle and where you begin to brake, because you're sort of coming on that angle and the way the hill comes down there, you may not get right against that first curbing. You may be 1, 2, 3, 4 feet off of that curbing. Some cars it's right against it, but some are better if you're off just a little tiny bit. And then as you turn back, and it's kind of that, again, it's kind of that point of the diamond where you get the most turn out of the car and rotate it back to get that good late apex coming out of there on the second apex. That one's important that you're on, in fact, driving on the curbing there. Uh, one of the things that you need to work on is how far you're going to let the car go out in the middle of the corner.
Mm-hmm. That was my problem. And how sharp I turned it when I was out there.
For some days, it works a little better. One thing about Laguna Seca, it's a low grip track, period. It doesn't have a lot of grip in it. And so you may go there and your car is used to pulling 1.2G or 1.8G or whatever in most corners. And you get to Laguna and it's like 1G and you're like, man, I suck. It's like, no, the track just doesn't have that same grip level. And especially if you're running a race there or a day where there's a lot of cars on track, where the grip is will change a little bit. And typically as the day goes on, if you get too wide, you can start to lose some grip because some marbles out there and dust and dirt. And Laguna is known for a little bit of the sand being pulled back on by people dropping wheels and stuff. So I don't like letting the car go too wide in that middle point where the point of the diamond is between the two apexes. So I don't like going too far out there. And
so for that turn specifically, it's kind of it's not a high risk, high reward turn, but it's got some risk to it if you blow it.
Yes.
So, but I don't see there's a big margin for error either. So you kind of got to pick, you need to commit to one of those two approaches, or you can get yourself into some unforeseen trouble that doesn't look like it should be there, right? But it's there.
So I would say that, the Laguna Seca is, to me, a relatively safe track. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are things you can hit, but the worst thing that usually happens in turn 2 is somebody, overcooks the braking zone and goes off and then gets stuck in the sand gravel trap out there. And
see, we had a lot of people going off to the left after the turn.
So what happens there often is they track out too far, drop a wheel on the outside of that curbing, and then overreact, and the car snaps back across and comes back across to the left and cuts across basically the pit exit lane.
Entry. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, but that's should be an easy fix. Is if you're running a track, just open your hands and drive straight. If that means driving straight with two wheels in the dirt for a little while, it's a whole lot better than spinning back across the track and hitting another car or getting all the way to that wall on the inside. So
speaking as a person who did that, when I was coming back with my two wheels off, I traveled much longer than I thought I would, because apparently I am not the first person to do that. And the transition from the dirt to the track is pretty high, because lots of cars have put their tires there. So you won't be the first, and you definitely won't be the last.
And the track comes back to the left. So you think you're driving straight, and then you realize that you're actually driving further off the track. So then you overreact and try to bring it back quicker. And that's when the big spins happen. So, turn 2 is you're gonna make up more on the braking and the entry to that corner than you are on the exit. Again, in equal cars, if you're in a kind of a spec series or something like that, the straightaway between 2 and 3 isn't long enough to make a big passing move into 3 very much. In multi-class events and races and stuff like that, there is, you still have to get a good exit out of there. But, turn 2 it's about how deep you can carry the braking and the corner entry.
True.
And which is a little different than that whole turn 9 complex, which
we can't escape. We have to talk about Laguna Seca, turn 8, 8A, 9.
Well, and I know you love the corkscrew, right?
No. No. Kind of, it was fun the first couple times, and then, Uh, and I don't know if you noticed this, Ross, but every time I go over the top of the corkscrew, the track is still where it was the last time I was there.
Despite what you think, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like just plan on the track not moving,
Yeah.
which it is California, so it could move, but hopefully
That's
you'll
true.
know. But it's there.
And I agree. I mean, the corkscrew, I mean, I
It's
remember
pretty.
the I remember the very first time I went down and I just kind of went, I can almost driving down the hill, shaking my head thinking, who did this? Like, what were they thinking to build a racetrack that just dropped down like that? Eh, but it's got character. It's different.
It does.
It's very different. But, to me, I believe that one of the most challenging corners on that track, and maybe the most challenging one, is turn 9, the big long left-hander after the corkscrew. And
Sure.
this is another one of those corners where, depending on how well your car changes direction and turns into the corner, is going to dictate where you turn in for turn 9. Sometimes you come down the corkscrew, the car kind of drifts out to the left, you bring it back over to the right to set up for turn 9. And there are cars and drivers that like to move the car at least 3/4 of the way over, maybe 7/8 of the way over to the right before arcing down to the apex of turn 9. I believe that in most cars, that's way too far out to the right, because you're you're traveling more distance and asking the car to go from a great one direction back to a big change in direction the other way. And for me and most of the cars that I've driven and coached with, approaching 9, I think if you start approaching turn 9 about the middle of the track and you turn in from there, and some cars you might even turn in just a little tighter than halfway, and other cars
Mhm.
that might be just a little bit outside that. I know, one of the things in with prototypes, and again, I don't know how many pro drivers driving DPIs and LMP2s or what listening to this podcast, not that many, but
Much more than listen to our podcast, Ross. Don't worry.
well, the how the diff in the car works has a big impact in corners like that. Now, and that diff situation might be applicable to somebody in a E46 BMW. Like if how the diff works in your car, sometimes as you lift off the throttle, the diff opens up and you can change direction very quickly. Some other diffs don't open up quite so quickly, and you turn in a fast corner like that, and the car just doesn't want to change direction. It wants to kind of plow straight ahead still, because you got those two wheels still driving it forward. So that's one of those corners that the diff makes a diff.
Yeah, the tricky part. I'm going to save you by not reacting to that joke in case people are listening.
Yeah.
So, no problem. The tricky part for me for 9 was I could tell when I was too far left at entry, but I couldn't tell when I was too far right. So I was just kind of meandering with no real idea of what was it, because they all felt about the same. Some I liked a little better, some I liked a little less, but I couldn't find, either through time or feel, one that was like, that's what I want to do again. So I ended up just kind of, if you were following me for more than a few laps, I apologize to everybody in Lucky Dog, because I wasn't showing you what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and in the car we were in, I just couldn't find that happy, like, oh, that felt good, or oh, that made the time. Neither. It was just like,
as my friend Peter Crow says, when we're doing the virtual track, you're dilly-dallying.
well, if you saw the times on my laps, yes, I was,
Yeah.
but I wasn't trying to. It just happened.
So here's what I believe is not the trick, not the secret, but a key to turn 9. It has less to do with where you turn in and more to do with the speed adjustment you do prior and while turning in. So one of the challenges of turn 9 is visually it's difficult because you can't see the exit when you're turning in.
But there's
you're
a
kind of,
lot of it, so it's not an intimidating turn. You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, it is fast,
Yeah.
but you kind of go, okay, but you can't see the exit when you don't know the end, right?
Correct.
And so you can, and there's no curbing up the edge of the track that says I always turn in one panel before the end of the curbing. Like it's a
Nope.
bit vague. But what is more important is as you approach that corner, practically every car has to do some kind of a speed adjustment. You've come down the hill from the corkscrew, flat on the throttle, you're approaching it, and as you approach it, you've got to either do a lift of the throttle or you've got to do some amount of brake. And one of the, I'm not going to say a mistake, but one of the problems that some drivers have is they make that speed adjustment early, and because of that, they get the car slowed down and they go, okay, I'm slow enough now. And they come off the brake pedal and they turn in, and the car does kind of, again, the car doesn't have energy in it. It doesn't have a load into it. So when the driver makes that brake, or they come off the brake and they turn the wheel, the car goes, okay, I'll kind of respond to what you want me to do here. So sometimes the key to turn 9 is actually, I think in terms of brake zones, from your begin of braking to your end of braking, and you actually do the exact same amount of that, but you just shift it forward a little bit so that you're actually doing it while you've got a little bit of wheel in, and now the car responds, and now the car turns, and now you can carry that speed through there and get back to power. So I would say, while a lot of drivers get really hooked up onto this and worried about where do I turn in for turn 9, it's less about that and more about what you do with that speed adjustment, the timing and where the position of that speed adjustment is. And for many drivers, it's a matter of moving that speed adjustment a little further into the corner so that now the car responds to what you want it to do.
And then you get a little excited on the exit of 9, but then you got to hustle back over because you got to get ready for the next one. But you definitely want to make the exit of 9, so that's a good one. And then I think the key to me would be not necessarily your line through 8 and 8A, but where your exit is of 8A, because that, to me, once that was solid, then I could start to work on 9. But until I got solid through there, 9 was just baffling.
True, and I jumped ahead to 9, assuming that, yes, anytime you get corners that are linked together, it's like that. It is that you got to get the first one right, or the second one and the third one are not going to be very good. So, and by the way, I'm kind of sitting here thinking, well, I wonder how many people listen to this, they've never been to Laguna or Road Atlanta or Mid Ohio, and
they should
absolutely, they should. But I actually think that the things that we're talking about here, the concepts apply almost anywhere, right? The concepts we're talking about do apply, and that's the fun part about this. So,
well, I think it's two reasons why we started to talk about whether we should do this or not. Was one, as you get your turn repertoire together, certain turns mimic other turns, and two, we wanted to make sure that people who have a lot of laps at a certain track, or have a home track, or have they've been doing this for a long time, that they realize that, sometimes you try something new and you find out sometimes it's better.
Well, often I'll ask drivers, how many times have you learned how to go fast by making a mistake and finding yourself on the wrong side of the track or something weird, and you're like, oh, that actually kind of worked. I got to go try that again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you can, one way to get rid of stagnations and get rid of plateaus is to try something new, because, I don't know if it's readily apparent, but once you say it, it really is. If you keep doing the same thing, if you're doing it the same, it should be the same. So it's going to be a plateau by definition. So
Yeah.
All right. We've hit Mid Ohio. We've hit Road Atlanta. we've hit Laguna Seca. We actually cheated on Laguna Seca and hit 2 places there.
Yeah.
So we need some place in the Northeast. I think when I think Northeast racetracks, my favorite is Pit Race. But for the rest of the world, we will talk about, let's say, Watkins Glen.
Are you telling me that you like Pit Race more than Watkins Glen?
Yeah.
Wow.
Huh. Sorry. Well, remember, I've only been there once. And the time I went there, I didn't do my prep, as we talked about in an earlier episode. So I was going over crest of hills with a turn coming up and not knowing if it was left or right. And that didn't exactly make me feel good. So that was where I learned my do your prep or don't go. So Watkins Glen has these turns. Basically, it's a complex that we're going to talk about. We talked about the bus stop into the carousel. And this is by definition, I think, exactly what you called it. This is a character series of turns, in that I don't know many people who've ever sit there and come out of the carousel going, nailed it, can't do any better than that.
Yeah.
At least with a 100% serious attitude, so.
Yeah. And I'm not going to say there's anything super trick about that section of track. I think there's the one common mistake that I see is people coming out of the bus stop, clipping past the 2 apex curbs, kind of, you've come in, you clip the right one, then the left one, and then you clip the last 2, which is a left and a right, and then bringing the car way out to the left to get set up for the carousel. Because again, that's, classic line theory is you set up on the outside, use all the track, and then swoop down to the inside. And by doing that, you're traveling more distance, and you're making a bigger transition from one direction to the other. So as you come out of the bus stop, you probably want the car set up mid-track ish, before
3/4 max, maybe
max. And then it's kind of then it's an arc down to that towards the apex. For a lot of people, there's a turn worker station that as you're at the top of the carousel, you can kind of look down, and there is a turn worker station that kind of aligns with approximately where the apex is going to be. And so I'd say, again, nothing super trick here, other than just don't get sucked into going way out to the left on the entry of the carousel. Mid-track's a good place to be. And then it's a matter of keeping the car as close to the tire's limits as you would like to drive the carousel. The carousel's a big skid pad.
You're in there for a while.
You're in there for a long time, and the idea is just to keep the tires at their limit. And it's easy to dilly-dally. Again, to use Peter's phrase, it's easy to dilly-dally through part of it because you're in it for so long. And your goal is to have the tires at the limit. Or, if you're in the mindset of I drive at 8/10, then have your tires at 8/10 all the way through that corner. Not I'm entering at 8/10 and now I just back off and I kind of, now I'm at 6/10 and, now I'm going to start squeezing the gas. I'm actually going to get up to 9/10 as I come out of the corner. That's not driving at 8/10.
Right.
So, you can almost think about it as what's the lowest common denominator? Well, you're driving at 6/10 for some portion of the corner. You're driving at 6/10 then. So keep the tires at that limit, or 9/10 or 10/10 or whatever it is. Maybe not 11/10.
Definitely not for me.
A little spinal tapping.
Yeah, definitely there. I think the big takeaway to remember is if it's a long turn like the carousel, you're in there for a long amount of time, and any mile per hour adds up to a more significant amount of time per lap than it would seem.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I was going to say, oh man, I love Watkins Glen, but didn't I say I love Mid-Ohio? I love Road Atlanta. I love Laguna Seca. I love Watkins Glen.
I think the shorter list is the tracks you don't like, but we'll do that another podcast, because that one may get us in trouble. We haven't done the Northwest though. I'm pretty sure I think I can think of maybe one or two that I could name, but you probably never went, and that's a good thing. We haven't done the Northwest, and since you're up there,
Can we go to Portland?
We can go to Portland. I've
I've
been
got
to
a lot of
Portland.
laps at Portland, and the Portland International is, it's funny. It's in some ways it's a home track. It's one of the home tracks. It's one that I started driving when I second year of racing, pretty much. I mean, I've been around it a lot. They did make some changes at one point. The front straightaway didn't have the festival chicane that they added, and
Mhm.
when they added it for a while, kind of like our conversation with Mid Ohio, where the corner numbering got all weird. There was a turn one stayed turn one, and the festival chicane was before that. So you kind of drove the festival chicane, then you got to turn one. And then a few years ago, they changed it so that now the festival chicane is turn 1, 2. And
Mhm.
so the corner that I want to just touch on here is turn 7. And that is the right hander that leads onto the back straight. And if you know Portland, the back straight is far from being straight. It's a
Mhm.
curving thing. But the right hander that leads onto this back straight, turn 7. Interesting thing is, a number of years ago, they resurfaced the track, and that's when Kart or IndyCar was going there, and they wanted the track to be slightly longer. So what they did was the entry to turn 7, they widened the track on the entry. So you're coming up to right-hand corner, they widen it to the left. So the distance you drove around there, and if you went right out to the far left-hand side, it increased the length of the track and made the track longer. And it made it, I can't remember, went from 1.9 to 2 or something. I mean, it's minuscule amount kind of thing, but it was a number that was worthwhile to have it longer. So they've got this big, wide expanse of track on the approach to turn 7, but you've come out of this left-hander, and the car is all the way out to the right-hand side. And then the question that everybody has is, well, do I bring it all the way back over to the left-hand edge and then turn in, or do I bring it partway over to the left-hand edge, approximately to where the track edge used to be? And a lot of the old timers are like, there's no point in going all the way out there because, man, I was always fast without going out there before. And others are going out there and they're going fast, and other people are going out there and they're going slower. So that is one of those things where I've had a number of people that ask me, should I go out all the way out and use all the track out there? And my answer is, it depends.
I was going to say I was late on the draw, but I knew the answer. I was
Yeah.
in.
And here's what it depends on. It depends on the speed of your car in terms of, because if you're going all the way out there, you're covering more distance. If you're in a slow car, a car that doesn't go very fast in a straight line relative to other cars, it takes a long time to get over there. And then the second part of that is, how well does your car transition from one direction to another? So
Mm-hmm.
because you come out of this right-hander, you're approaching that corner now. You don't have enough time to bring it in some cars. You don't have enough time to bring the car all the way back over to the left and get lined up parallel with the edge of the track before turning in. So you're actually approaching it and braking it on a slight angle and then having to turn sharper. And some cars, that's not a problem because the cars turn and change direction. They transition very nicely. But if you've got a car that's, I hate to use the word, a little lazy in its transition, then going all the way out to that far left might not be the fastest way to go. And in the kind of the last, I'm going to say the third of the factors that you have to compromise is how well you can get the car to change direction with the brake release. If you can get the car to take it out there and you can get the car to really rotate with a nice brake release without over slowing the car, then that's worthwhile doing. But if no matter what, the car is just, again, it's kind of related to how quickly will it change direction, but it's, in this case, can you make the car change direction with the way you drive? If you're not at the level with your driving yet where you can manipulate how much the car changes direction with the timing and rate of release of the brakes, then maybe you're better off using a little bit more of a bigger arc and not relying on getting the car to change direction quite so quickly. And so you really got those three factors, the distance you got to carry or cover, the how quickly your car transitions from the car's setup, and the third is how quickly your driving technique allows you to change the direction of the car. And based on that, that's going to tell you whether you want to go all the way out to the left or maybe 2/3 of the way over to the left. And again, this is a great example of a it's one of the problems that we are constantly solving at speed while driving on a racetrack. It's this math, geometry, sense of time, sense of speed, all these things, and we're factoring them around in our heads while we're driving. And when we get it right, we go, magic.
And well, even though we didn't intend it, I think the discussion of Portland Turn 7 sounds eerily similar, even though the turns are different to what we were talking about with Mid-Ohio at the Keyhole. We have to manage your distance versus your time versus your speed to get what you're looking for, which in racing is lap time.
Yeah. And then you go to, well, do you just look at the lap time? Because maybe you were faster there, but now you approached the turns at the end of the straightaway a little faster. So you overbraked and your lap time was actually slower. So you go, oh, that didn't work. That's where you got to start looking at segment times and all sorts of other things, which maybe is a topic for another day.
Well, if we only had another day, but we do.
We could do this again, couldn't we?
We could do this again. I think that would be a great idea because I'm having a great time.
Yeah, same here.
Absolutely.
Well,
if anybody at home has a turn that has perplexed them, if anybody at home has a turn that they just want to hear Ross give the correct answer and me make, somewhat questionable observations, send them in to us.
Yeah.
We'd love to have it.
Or any question, because we're going to do this try to stump me.
I don't think I have a chance.
Oh, I'm faking it here because I'm basically stumped and just making the stuff up as we go here. So that's the whole idea of this thing. Don't tell anybody, okay?
Nope. Never said a word. Not me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ross. I do appreciate the opportunity, and we will ask you questions again next time.
Okay, and thank you. And as we always wrap these things up, I say keep learning, having fun, and see you at the track.
Whether you've been to a particular track before or it's your first time, understanding the circuit in detail is critical if you're going to be fast and smooth. Do you know where the apex is for the most critical corners? Or even what corners are the most critical? How about knowing the best places to make a pass? How about knowing exactly where the track has the most grip and where it doesn't? And what about where to find visual clues? Well, you don't have to worry. Ross and fellow coach Peter Kraus are here to help. They will take you on a video tour of a variety of tracks. They are virtual track walks. The feedback about these Speed Secrets training videos has been over the top. Experienced drivers who've been going to the same track for a decade or more say that the virtual track walk helped them shave seconds off their best ever lap times. Go to speedsecrets.com/virtual track walks to preview this amazing tool. It's a detailed resource you have to see to believe. That's speedsecrets.com/virtual track walks. Keep learning and, of course, having fun.